All right, so our PowerPoint is not cooperating, so Sam, you'll just have to hit the button when I signal you. Maybe I'll figure it out during the Bible class. Uh-oh, not that button. He's making it big. I appreciate it. So bear with us technically. And I want to give an update. Let's start with the Great Commission, Matthew 28. That's going to also be in our sermon at the 11 o'clock hour. Matthew 28, the last three verses. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. I read this verse while we were there in one of the settings and commented that the gospel had come all the way over to where we live here in America, from where it started. We're a lot farther from it, I guess, than they are. We're both a long ways from where it originated. And thankfully, I am thankful that the Lord's commission has caused the gospel to go around the globe so that even way over here, we have Christians. Way down there is Christians. There's Christians kind of all around. And we're all part of the Lord's family and part of the Lord's kingdom. And so it's a beautiful thing to have spiritual family around the world. And it's a wonderful opportunity when we have it to meet Christians from different places. And it's a joy when you travel, even if you just travel around here in the U.S. or even just locally. I went up to a Bible study yesterday in Shelbyville and met brethren I didn't know. So it's just a joy to meet Christians in other places, but it's really kind of neat to meet them from other countries and see how they worship and see how they do. And this is an ongoing effort, of course, of the gospel continuing to spread. And there's lots and lots of places where the gospel is continuing to spread, and it needs to spread here in Lincoln County as well. It needs to grow and spread. So, really it's a global mission for the word of God to find receptive hearts. It never ends. That will always be the case. Even if you could teach everybody here, it wouldn't take long. There'd be more people that need to be taught. And even if everybody has heard the message, there's this, when they respond, verse 20 says, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. The teaching and training part of that and growing in knowledge is an ongoing effort. And that was part of the reason why we went as well, to do some teaching and to share the word of God with those Christians over there. So I was thinking, well, I've already written quite a bit in the emails. I know a lot of you followed along and commented to me about that. And I don't want it to be just a complete rehash of that for those of you who are following along. And I've also posted several videos on YouTube that capture some of the experiences. So I tried to pick out some photos for this that are not in the emails, but I think quite a few of them were. And bring out maybe some details that I didn't talk about and mention some things today just to kind of go through the trip. And I want to talk about specifically some of the needs that we encountered and some that we, were able to address, some that we were not, and kind of explain a little bit about the financial situation there, because really one of the reasons that we went, one of the main reasons, there were a couple of purposes. One was to go see the men we support. We feel like we have an obligation to be aware of the work that's going on that we all have a part in. And so that was, we told each of them, we want to see you, we want to see your work, we want to see the people you work with, the churches you work with. And so that was, as elders and people who send money there to support them, we wanted to understand their work. And we've sent a ton of money in relief to people, and there's requests that come in regularly, and we wanted to see the people where the aid had gone, and we also wanted to get a better understanding ourselves and a firsthand experience of the situation there, so that we could try to communicate that with you, and we would all be, better informed about the circumstances in which these people live. because obviously that's very related to our sending aid over there. So those are some of the reasons why we went. And I didn't get into all of that in the emails, but I'll explain a little bit as we go along. And then we had the one concern or question that came up about the authority and the way that we send the money and all that. So that gave us, as I mentioned before I left, we felt like we could improve that process. And we addressed that with each of the men that we support there. We had meetings with all three of them, and we talked about that, and we have made some changes, and I'll explain those as we go along. Next slide. Yeah. So first stop, we were picked up by Comfort and Cedric. One thing we found out by the way these guys work, they all work in pairs. And somewhat that's a cultural thing we found out. That lots of people, the work that they do it as part of, they do it as a group, they do it in teams. Even they have these little bitty cars that drive around picking people up, kind of like, what do you call it, Uber kind of things, but they just run around, and they have a little bigger ones that are like small minivans, they call them commuters. But in there are two people, there's the driver and there's a guy called the conductor, and the conductor's job is to collect the money, and it's like, that's interesting, you know. But it seemed like every job, Lee and I, a funny one, we saw at the very first airport we landed in Johannesburg. There's this huge, huge airport. We kept remarking on how surprisingly big this place was. And so if you can imagine this tile floor that just goes and goes, and there were two guys working together to mop it. And here's how they work together. One of them had two wet floor signs. So he would set one of them down, and the other guy would mop like a little section like this. And then the other guy would take his other wet floor sign, and he would do that. And till it kind of dried a little bit. And then he would move the wet floor sign down a little bit, and the guy would mop like another little section. And they were talking the whole time. They were just like carrying on and talking. The other guy would fan it. And we just stood back and watched this. That's one way to do that. You know, I guess, you know, that's one way to do that job. But anyway, it seemed like a lot of people work as pairs and teams. But when it comes to doing the Lord's work, I was reminded that this is a very biblical thing. God commissioned, especially Jesus, sent people out in twos. And you look at Paul's journeys, they usually work together in pairs. They really did. And there's even wisdom literature about that in Ecclesiastes. Two are better than one, right? And I feel like that's a good thing to go in pairs. And when we have things to do, if we need to go visit people, if you want to go out and teach, if you want to do something, get a partner. It's a good thing. So everywhere we went, we were met by at least two people almost all the time, two brethren, and they work together, and they even work together in the preaching that they do. So Cedric is kind of a partner with Comfort, and we were glad to meet those because one of the things that we talked about, I'll go ahead and get into that, is when we send aid, as we discussed here, if you were here for that lesson before I left, from the moment it's collected and we start counting it all the way through the process, there's multiple people involved. And we went through Paul's instructions to the Corinthians about doing things honorably in the sight of God and man. But there comes a point when we would transfer it where it goes to one individual, and that person makes sure that it's done there and sends us back a feedback on that. But we felt like, yeah, you know, it looks like in the Bible there's always multiple people at every stage involved. And so we talked to each of these guys and said, I went through the whole thing. We talked about our lesson and what the Bible says about it and how we would like to involve more than one person on their end in the receiving and delivering, handling funds. And so Comfort identified Cedric as kind of partner in the work. And it's as simple as we create a little Facebook group. And when we communicate and send, we keep both of them in the loop. And it's, you know, it's one more set of eyes. It's just another person involved instead of only one person, you know, kind of being in the loop and knowing what's going on. It's just another person to be communicating and be aware of things. And that kind of transparency and sunlight and all that, you know, is a good thing. That's, again, you know, why we have two people count and two people look at the books. It's not that you don't trust one or the other, but it's just a good practice so that things would be done honorably in the sight of God and of man to have more than one person involved. The other question that came up was, what about elders at those receiving congregations? And we addressed that everywhere we went as well. We talked about it with the men. We asked them about the elders. We did some teaching on organization of the church and God's plan for the church. So we addressed that as best we could. And we did ask them specifically. Lee would usually be the one to bring it up. Like, okay, I see you had a collection. Who is in charge of that? Where does it go? How do you decide what you do with the money that you collect? And, they would explain, like when we get to Pick's congregation, there's a couple of guys there, and they're part of the group that are going to be in the loop that would collect the money, and then they would decide and discuss what they're going to do with it. And so with those questions that you raised and the discussion that we had here, we carried that with us and shared those questions, made some adjustments to our operating procedures, and shared some lessons from the Word. And so that was part of what we did. I didn't get into all that in the emails because the email distribution was larger than just this group. I had some family and Sarah's family. And so I didn't really want to kind of get into a lot of that business in the emails. But I did want to give you that feedback. And if you have further questions or suggestions about how it can be done better, we're always open to that. I hope that's clear that we take all those suggestions and questions seriously and try to act on them. All right, next, Sam. This is the first place we stayed. I don't have a picture of all the places that we stayed, but it was like a little, I don't know what to call it, bungalow type thing. But anyway, in there's kind of like a little room with a couple of beds. Most of the places, some had air conditioning, some did not. This place did have air conditioning, which was nice. And it's a very comfortable place to stay. I don't know, is that the banana tree, Lee, right there at the corner? Yeah. So I think you can almost see that they're dark green, so they don't show up very well. But anyway, I think the first time I've ever seen bananas growing. But Lee said, oh, yeah, we grew them in Fayetteville. So I guess you don't have to go to Zimbabwe to see bananas growing. And Lee and Grant, by the way, will hopefully have opportunities to share their stories as well. So you'll get to hear some. I'm gone. We're going to graduation in Vermont next weekend, and Lee's going to speak. And I believe he's planning to give his some thoughts and a lesson from his experiences too. Next. First day. I did mention this in the emails. Lee got put to work right away, and Grant was helping, and I was taking pictures. That's pretty much the chunk of the suspension, the tie rod fell down, and the reason why I wanted to mention this was not just to go through that whole story again. They've fixed it 3 times, and then we left it when it finally made it to where we're going. Now, I left out another part of this. We drove. I mean, they brought us to the hotel. They picked us up. We just had time to change clothes and get in the car. They waited in the parking lot while we were changing. And then we drove to they stopped along the way in this little town, and we got some drinks. Actually, that first picture we're standing there with the Mountain Dew, that was the stop. Well, when we got back out from getting the drinks, the car wouldn't start. Just battery low. And so they talked to some local people, and the guy pulled his car over, and we were like, well, it's not going to reach. But in 2 seconds, he had the battery out, and he just brought it over and set it on top of this car. And they grabbed a couple of random wires. So it was, one was about this long, one was about that long. And so he was just holding one. He was holding one of them down. The other guy was just mashing the other one on the terminals. And as when he would start trying to start, after a second, the guy, and then he would mash the wire. It was that's how you jump them off, I guess, there. And, but it didn't work. So it wouldn't go. And one of the guys was trying to convince me it was a fuel pump or something. So they said, you're going to have to push it. So we all pushed the truck out into this dirt road. And then we all get to push it. And there's about 6 people or so. And Comfort popped the clutch and it started. But then we knew you can't turn it off now, right? You know the drill. So it's like it's going to run till you turn it off at the next stop. So all the times it was doing this, it was idling because we couldn't shut it off because if we were out in the middle of nowhere then. And so it was like walk around the ground and hope to find something we can use or take apart something inside under the seats in the back. This first time they fixed it, the grill is held on, that little Toyota looking black grill thing. We opened the hood and it's held on with 3 or 4 pieces of baling wire. So we took one of those off because the other three looked like they would do the job, and handed that to Lee, and he shoved it up in there and put that in. Well, that broke really quick. It only lasted about 10 minutes. And then we started using other things. I say we. I took pictures. And they started using other things after that. But really, the reason I wanted to mention that is these roads just destroy vehicles. Riding along on that first ride out through there, I don't know how it happens, but they said they think it's the big trucks or something, but something makes this like, it's almost like the rumble strip on the side of the road, but much more pronounced. And so as you're driving, it's just like that. And so you have two options. You can go really slow and you'll get there tomorrow because it's so far away, you know. Or you can do comfort style and just go. It's like this. And then every now and then there's a big pothole. And we were constantly saying, you know, maybe you should slow down a little bit. But you can feel the car being destroyed as you drive along. It's just destroying stuff. It's crazy. And so it didn't surprise me. A little bit later, we were driving through town. There's a huge billboard, and it's this lady. She's standing there, and she's holding a shock absorber because they advertise like suspension stuff that you have to replace all the time. Sarah was reminding me, because she reads these letters that my aunt and uncle send from Ghana. They've had a car that they've had since I don't know, decades, a Nissan pickup truck, but it is always in the shop. So when one thing we get requests from those guys, both Pick and Comfort, is, hey, my car's broke down. And one of the other guys that we talked to was telling us, Hadamoyo has a vehicle, his car's broke down. Well, we're just surprised that there's a car over there that's not broke down, because it's like, how in the world would you drive around these roads and not just, tear your cars up? So that's a real thing, and we've lived it and seen it. So when we get those kind of requests, we understand. And to do the work they do, they use these vehicles extensively. Okay, next step. First place we stopped, I think Grant took this picture. If you see pictures of kids, it's usually Grant taking the picture. He would always zoom, find the little kids and take pictures of them. These people, amazingly, had been there for hours because we were so late. We were late for a number of reasons, not only because we stopped 4 times to fix the car, but they had just been there. They were singing and hanging out, waiting for hours till we got there. It was amazing. All right, Sam. The next day was Sunday. We went to church. We split up. Sam and I went to this congregation. Grant and I went to this congregation, Queens Park. Lee went with Comfort to Mtambani, where he works. There's a little group of preachers there, a total of 4 that work together. And so I was with 2 of the guys that go here to this congregation. Now, this is in town. And if you compare, you can kind of tell the difference between in town and the rural areas. The buildings, the roads, even the people seem to be in a little bit better shape. And some, financially, it just, the appearance seems to be to me. But I was talking to this guy. They said, you can't say his name. When I asked Comfort, he said, and you're going to go with this brother. And I said, what's his name? Because I was he said, well, you can't say it. I said, well, I want to write something down. He said, okay, it translates to keeper in English. So just call him Keeper. I said, okay, but what's his name? And it's there's I can't even make the sound now. There's a little noise that we don't have. So I spent the rest of the time practicing. I'm like, I'm going to say his name before. And like near the end of the trip, I said, oh, and we were with Mtlini. And they're like, you said his name. So, I made it my goal to try to be able to pronounce it. But being that guy, Keeper, let's say, went to this congregation. He explained to me later that of everybody there, 2 people have a job. One of them is a school teacher, and he makes $250 a month. And I don't remember what the other person did. And so he said that they have a very meager collection, as you can imagine, and the building is in need of repairs. They showed Grant around. They pointed out some things, but it's quite a bit. It looks nice in this picture, but if you just look around, you start seeing all kinds of stuff that needs to be done. And they don't really have much collection. And so, of course, they would appreciate some help with that. There's this need for help at every turn, everywhere you go. That's a hard thing because you try to figure out what can we do. You look at this building, and we met other people that meet under a tree, and they're wanting to have a shelter. So we decided, well, maybe shelter is a bigger priority than fixing the building. But his point is the place is just going to, and he doesn't know what to do. And I don't know what to tell him. You know, it's like it's just going to crumble around them. They don't have the resources to keep it up. Another thing you can kind of tell from this picture, there's very few young men of working age. The ones that you will see, a lot of them were preachers that we had met, and they explained that there's no jobs. Unemployment's really high. And so what a lot of them do is they go to South Africa to work. There's jobs in South Africa. The economy's a lot better there. And so what's left behind are some of their wives and children. And they go over there, kind of like the migrant workers that come here. They work and send some money home. But they say it's really hard on marriages. Some of them don't survive it, the marriage that is. And so what's left behind are little children, older people. But just like the young men of working age, you don't see too many around in some of these congregations because they're off somewhere far away trying to earn some money because there's just not much to do there to go get a job and actually provide for your family. So that's, again, just trying to paint a picture of the economic situation, and all that's kind of behind some of these requests that we get. Okay, next, Sam. Comfort is, you might get requests from him or see something about him for this. He's been renting, but he's been also building a home. And this is the house that he is building. The walls are made of brick. It's really strange how they build stuff there. Anyway, you build the walls first. There's no floor, so the inside looks exactly like this. It's just the dirt. We start with the floor. I'm not a home builder, but at least what I've seen. Then the roof goes on. So you have like rooms in there that will be bathrooms. There's no plumbing yet. So I was like, wait a minute, how are you going to? So that after they build the house, they make holes and they run the plumbing. So it's really, really strange. I told them, we run the plumbing first and then pour the slab if you're doing that style. And then you build the walls and then you build. So anyway, they do things different there. But he gets a little bit at a time from various people. And maybe somebody will give him enough to put on the roof. And then he's now looking for money for windows and for the floor. So that's some things that he has asked us about as well, probably more individually than as a congregation. All right, next. So then we go out to this rural place the next day. There's several things in this picture. People had come from far away, and you see these little donkey carts everywhere. For some reason, most of them have 4 donkeys, which seems overkill to me, but I don't know a lot about donkeys. So maybe you need 4 donkeys maybe it helps them go a long ways. I don't know. But they had 4 donkeys pulling these carts, and they had come, there was about 3 or 4 of those donkey carts there, and we saw them everywhere we went. Then every now and then I'd see one with 3, and I thought, oh, poor guy, he's only got 3 donkeys for his cart. And there were these bicycles, and then people had walked, and out there are the restroom facilities, and a lot of places had a men's and a women's, which I was kind of impressed. It's basically an outhouse, as you could imagine. Next. This lady in black walked 30 kilometers to be there. So I did a conversion. That's about 18 miles. So it'd be like walking from the interstate to my house, more or less. So then you start to realize why they hang around, because if you walk that far to be there, you're not going to just go home if people are 30 minutes late, arriving. And who knows what time you'd have to leave to be there. So people just sort of kind of gather as they show up, and then when we get there, we're ready to go. And then they usually eat, and they did on this day. Next slide. They had prepared some food. That's kind of a picture of the food. So the little white stuff is the sadza. That's the stuff they make out of the cornmeal. When we send food aid, it's usually to buy the sadza. That's their staple. There's not much to it. It's corn. It's not really a great diet. Quite a few people we met, including Pick himself, are diabetic. And I'm convinced just because that their main diet is corn. It's not a good main thing. I'm not a nutritionist either, but it seems to me that that's probably part of the problem. But it's cheap, and it fills your belly. And so then you usually have something else to go with it. And if you have it on special occasions here, you have some meat, like they've got goat. and then that's some greens, and it was actually all really good. Grant loved it. Look at him nod. He was like, that stuff is great. So anyway, next. At Pick's church. So then we Comfort handed us off to Pick. And the reason I wanted to include, that's Pick, and the reason I wanted to include this picture is because individually, we sent quite a bit to help with that roof that's right there. Again, for whatever reason, the way they build stuff, they built the walls first, and then it sat for years without a roof. It's really strange to us. But I think they just do what they can with the money they've got at the moment, and then they hope to get some more money to do the next step. And so, you know, it's not the way we typically do, but that's how it works. But I'm glad they've got a shelter. We were glad to be underneath it, even though it was a mild, probably 80-degree day. It was still a lot more comfortable with a shade over your head than it would have been in the sunlight. It's the outside and some of the members there. And he introduced us to two of the men there who are, and I wrote their names down, and I think they're at the end. Yeah, they're at the end of the slide. That who help him with the disbursement of funds when we send aid. So that place was in town where Pick works, called Columbine. And then we drove way out into the countryside. And this is a typical rural kind of assembly. This is at Atherstone, if I'm not mistaken. And these people meet under this tree. They don't have a shelter at all. So this was their meeting place. And the ladies will all sit on the ground, and they sit with their legs straight out. It looks like it wouldn't be comfortable if they can sit that way for hours. The men sit on a bench, which is not super comfortable, but it's better than that, I think, in terms of comfort. That's just their culture. I found the same thing in India. I don't know why it's that way. It's just the culture. Far off in the back, you might be able to make out right over Grant's shoulder, the beginnings of a little square thing. That's a bathroom. So they've been saving up, they got some money, and they're building the ladies' room. So the first thing they build is a little brick walls, and they've got a hole dug, and in the hole is it's lined with bricks around like that. And so this one of the only ones that is still under construction that we really peeked in and tried to understand how it was made. But and plus you can see with the sunlight shining down. So it's it's bricked down into the ground, and then there's a concrete pad poured with a hole, and then they build brick walls up around it. And Pick even sent me an updated picture since this that they've kept working on it. You can't really tell, but there's kind of a pile of bricks. Some of the bricks they make out of the dirt right there, and they form it. And some they get from other places. I didn't quite understand all that. But they're hoping to build a men's room to go with it, and they're hoping to get a shelter. And so we thought, well, that might be something that we could potentially help with. And so we asked them, well, how much do you need for that? And later, Pick emailed us a list of materials and costs. And I also talked to Steve Klein, because one of the last churches we visited, he and some individuals had collected money and sent over there. And he said in the last year, they have sent and helped 8 or 9 people build a shelter, 8 or 9 congregations with individual donations. And so I was surprised. I just found that out this past week. So it's kind of like little pole barn structures, just some, and a little metal roof is what they send them money for to do. And then they're able to and it's probably not, on a day like this, it was actually really pleasant. But you can imagine on it when it's super hot or when it's raining, it would not be a good situation. We happened to be there on beautiful weather the entire time. Very comfortable, cool in the shade, little light. I mean, it was just really, really nice. So we had it. We were very blessed with the weather. Another little church. I believe this was Vugwe. I tried to capture on this. This one's been around a while. They do have a little building, and they've marked the property with these plants that look like something like an aloe vera, but I don't think that it is. It's a little spiky around the edges. But anyway, they had outlined the whole thing, and they even had a little driveway to pull in. And you can tell what's what by just the little line of aloe plants. And then you have these trees, and all of them are trimmed real nicely at about this height. Everything is like pruned exactly the same by the goats and the cows or whatever, the donkeys. So they all eat stuff up to like the same height. So everything looks really nice and manicured, but it's really just the, if you look around, there's some goats like standing on their leg trying to get what they can reach. After the thing, everybody kind of finds a tree to talk underneath. So everybody just gathers under the shade of a tree. And we visited with the brethren there. One thing they asked about was window panes. So in their building, the windows are just open. And am I getting this right, Lee? That's what they said, right? They wanted window panes. And I was always very surprised by that because to me, in their climate, you would think you would never want to seal off a enclosure, but they have them the kind that you can open. And I still didn't quite understand exactly. So I was asking the preacher, why what do you want the window panes for? And he said that they are concerned that the wind could blow the roof off in a storm. I said, okay. And when was this building built? It was built like 12 years ago. Okay, all right. We'll add that to our list, and we'll get back. So everywhere people are asking for stuff, and what we would just say everywhere we went was, we're making a list, and we can't do everything. And so when you're trying to prioritize things, to me, again, the last place met under a tree. These guys have a building, but they want window panes. If you're asking me to prioritize, that's probably low on the priority list to me. And the risk of the roof blowing off seemed to be low to me. So, anyway, it's interesting. But it is nice to be able to stand there and look at it, because when you just get this stuff through some Facebook message, it's hard to understand. And sometimes it's hard to understand when you're standing there, but at least you get a clearer picture of, what the need is. Next, Sam. They, for whatever reason, this is my backpack. And, it got that way. It was clean when we got in the car, and it got that way by the time we got where we were going, because they would on these dusty roads with the windows down. The car is just filled with dust, and we suggested that it might be more pleasant if we had the windows up, because it had a working AC. So the AC's on and the windows are down, and the dust is just rolling in. And we said to Pick, I think if you tried the windows up, it would be more comfortable. But so he rolled his up, but this older preacher that was riding with him, his partner is a guy named Big Boy, and we got a picture of him. And he didn't seem to want to tell Big Boy to roll his window up. And so Big Boy apparently just likes to ride with his window down, And so when I said that to Pick kind of rolled his up, but we still have this dust coming in from Big Boy's side. And so the solution was the next day when we got in the car, they handed out masks. And so the next day we rode with a mask on, and Big Boy's, ready to go. It's like, okay, things are a little different. But anyway, another thing that blew my mind is, and you start paying attention as we go through, the people all looked almost out of time. I got to hurry. Their clothes were clean, bright, colorful whites, and bold colors, and they all look clean all the time. And I'm thinking that it's dirt floors, dirt roads, dusty, everything. You would think everybody would just be, we got dirty just getting there. Like every night, my clothes were dirty, but you look around and like everybody else looked clean. It's like, I don't understand how they found the secret of somehow staying clean in this environment. It's really amazing. Okay, next, Sam, we got to hurry along. We did find some familiar foods next. In case, by the way, but if you ever want to go, we can find you some French fries. So if you want to go on the next trip. Okay, next. See, look at these clean people. Next. No, the other way. Pick and his wife. Next. Pick's grandfather, 101 years old. I doubt I'll ever baptize anybody older than that. Baobab Tree. Jack talked about these in Ghana, and I was excited when we saw one, so we pulled over. They're kind of here and there. They say if it's 8 feet brown at the bottom, it's 1,000 years old. I don't know how they know, but I wouldn't doubt it. They're humongous. Everything else is weird because everything is really low vegetation because of the climate. So the trees are all like small, scrabby looking trees. And then every now and then, one of these guys. So they really stand out when you come across them. We saw these kind of spots all along the way. This is actually open for business, but you can just tell the economy is real poor, especially out in the rural areas. That's Big Boy, and that is Sapiwa. We always got his name mixed up. But, Tapiwa. See, I said it wrong every time. And so then I start questioning myself. These three guys work together. And so when we talk about sending funds and having somebody else in the loop, now we've worked with these brothers. They've translated for us. We spent days riding around the car with them. And so we have people on Pixie that we can keep in the loop, as well as those guys at his Columbine church that are involved in the work there. Then we went to Robert's side, and man, what a change of scenery. You go from this, where Comfort and Pick lived, to over there on the far eastern side. It's mountainous. Everything's more green. It's beautiful. What I never could understand, and I did ask them this, even on the other side, they said, yeah, the people over there, the food problem is worse. And I don't know why this is, because there's more greenery over there. You would think they would have better food sources, but for whatever reason, the economics of it is, this is where we actually ran into people with more in need of food on that side of the country. Next. We decided that Lee brought him some sunglasses, and then we decided they were almost indistinguishable once you put them on. So they're like twins. We told Robert if he grew a goatee, nobody would be able to tell apart. And he said, Lee told him he has a brother Robert here. So this is his African brother Robert. So that's just... All right, next. That was kind of an ongoing thing. We stopped at this one place, just incredible, but I'll say it for another day. Next. Waterfalls, the tallest in Africa, over here. Next. Getting around to the rural areas. We went with them on these days where we just go out and visit people in their homes. That was our favorite. Everybody, I think, agrees. That was like our favorite part of the whole trip. Because with Comfort and Pick, it was long days of bumpy roads of just hurrying from one church to another. But here we got out and parked, and then we would get out and walk around and just go from house to house visiting people. And it was beautiful. Up this hill quite a ways, a little 80-year-old man lives by himself. And to get to his house, and this is the only way to get there or back. So every time he comes to church or goes anywhere, he's got to cross this creek. Next. This is his place. We found that every little home place in the village looks similar. The round thing you see is the kitchen. It has a thatched roof. And then there's usually a square building that's the house. I don't remember if I said this last time or not. But I asked them, why is the kitchen always round and the bedroom place square? And they said, we found it this way, which means tradition. That's just the way we do it. Kitchens are round and houses are square. So, okay. Next. This lady invited us in her home, and Robert had told us to kind of just pay attention, and you might notice some people who have more or less food. So her kitchen was basically empty. And but of course she was willing to share what she did have and had been cooking. And so hers was pintos and the salsa, and I think, did I say widow? I think her husband was working. This isn't one of the widow's houses. Her husband was working that day. I'm kind of hit or miss with pintos. I like just about everything, but sometimes they're good. These were excellent. Some of the best I've had. Really, really good. Sitting outside, visiting, encouraging this guy in yellow. His wife, who's sitting right over there, you almost can't make her out on the left, was a faithful Christian, but they told us that he had been needed some encouragement. And later that day, we had a gathering, and he was there, and he was singing out, and he seemed to have been encouraged by the visit. Next. Now you see more food in this lady's kitchen. So once you start kind of looking for it, you notice like, okay, some of these houses look bare, and some they have some stuff stored up, and so it kind of gives you a sense of their, how much food they have. This lady was baptized. I believe her name was Brenda. Now we can hardly tell them apart. They got hats on. Next. And they would wear those too. If it was like 70 or below, they had on coats and toboggans. Some people had, like this is inside of another person's house out in the village, and clearly they have a little more stuff, right? But this man in the gray in the corner would be baptized after this conversation. Sitting beside, okay, so here's the other men that work with Robert. That's Patamoyo in white, and then Patrick, and Jack. Jack is about 21, and he's married, and his wife is expecting, and he's kind of a preacher in training. Patrick preaches for one of the other congregations there, and so does Patamoyo. These 4 guys do their visiting and their work together. I realize we're running short on time. I'm trying to hurry. Next. They asked Grant if he would baptize that guy. And Grant said, I'm not qualified. They said, there's no qualifications. You're a Christian man. And so he said, okay. And the only thing I told him, make sure his feet stay under. And when he goes down, he goes under. We watched the replay, and he went under. So it was all good. And so it was a wonderful experience for Grant and for all of us. Next. Another guy was baptized, and Patrick, not Patrick. Yeah, Patrick did that. Next. Example of like a little pole barn type structure there. This is where 92 families meet at a place called, well, that's not 22 miles. That's at where Robert usually is. Yeah, just left it. Anyway, next. Our last stop was, we spent a part of 2 days doing a little sightseeing. This is Victoria Falls, and you can't really get it in a picture because it's so huge. It just keeps going that way. So you can sort of see how the falls disappear into the screen, but you walk along this trail, and it's just amazing how far it goes. Really amazing. Next. We did visit a little, right beside that is a wildlife reserve type area, and with the guys there, we took them and we went and did a little tour of that. Next, there's some zebras. I didn't get a lot of really good pictures of what we did see, but we saw quite a bit of wildlife wandering around. Really cool. Next, at that place is a big, Victoria Falls, people come from all over the world to go there. So suddenly you see like really, really, really American looking restaurants, and everything is really nice. And so we were kind of laughing and saying, for a lot of people, they think they probably fly into here and they think this is Zimbabwe, but it's really kind of like a little island of economic prosperity in the middle of this country where, you don't have to go very far away from that, and things are back to what we experienced. Next, on the way home, one of the first things we got that looked familiar was we saw a Chick-fil-A. We walked off the plane, and we hang a right, and we're just walking along. There's Chick-fil-A, and we're like, that's it. We're having our Chick-fil-A. So finally, last slide, some business items. From the money that we collected, as I said, some of that we handed out as we went along for various things that would come up, like the money that people donated to us. We had one of the things that they do is those guys that work together, if like they're part of the translating team or if they're driving, you give them, traditionally they would explain to the other preachers that come, usually if somebody works with you and translates for you, you give him some money. So we would give them $20 or $30 for working with us that day, or if they did the driving, we'd give them some money to help with the, their car and all that kind of stuff. So we use some of it to support those teams of people that we worked with. And then we made lists of requests. Some of those things are real easy to justify, like the need for Bibles and psalm books. There was one older preacher that needs mobility, whether it be some kind of wheelchair, tricycle thing. We were waiting on a quote for that. So we decided to gather some more information, and then we can send that electronically once we get the final details. We did address the need for elders. We talked about that with the men. We did teaching on that. They had a lot of questions about qualifications, which we had just studied here. So we would discuss that with them. For the various preachers, when it comes to transparency and accountability, for comfort, we have Cedric. You saw a picture of him, and we worked with him. So we kind of grouped them together. There's the 2 guys that work with Pick at Columbine, Gift and Matthias. And then Robert and Patamoyo, you saw him in the white shirt. So we've got these Facebook message groups that we can communicate with them. We sent money to Comfort ahead of time because his pickup truck was broken down. And obviously in order to be able to cart us all over Croatia. And then as you saw, it broke down while we were there. And we gave him more money to get it fixed while we were there. Robert, by the way, doesn't own a vehicle. So what he normally does is catch one of those little commuter things. So the way that works is you stand by the road, and as people drive by, you do this, and they pull over, and you give them $1, and they take you to town. And that's how he gets his whole family to church every week. And that's how he gets out into the villages, is he just kind of, it's a little better than hitchhiking, but it's not much different than that. It's like somewhere between hitchhiking and Uber type of thing. But basically you just rely on whatever. But he doesn't even have his own vehicle. Robert's wife, I need to mention this. Maria had been in, you might recall 6 months ago or so, she had sort of like a stroke or some kind of weird, like she collapsed, and it was spent some time in the hospital. We sent some help in. She got over that, but she's having some severe pains in her side. And they've been to the doctor. They didn't know what was causing it. When we got there, she wasn't feeling well enough to be out much. We did see her for breakfast one morning, but she was just having some really painful symptoms. So as we were leaving, he was telling us that she was feeling bad. He messaged us again. They had spent the night in the hospital, and the hospital said, you know, you need to take her to a bigger hospital in a bigger town where they can have more ability to figure out what's going on. So they are planning to go tomorrow, I believe, to that. And we sent money, $2,200 is what the estimate was, to be able to take her and get all this checked out. So just the people in his community weren't able to get to the bottom of it. And we're trying to help get her figured out what's causing her problems. Then there was this last thing was that we talked about possibly helping was for the building where they're building the bathroom, but they just meet under a tree currently. And if we do that, it would be probably as an individual thing, not something we would do from the treasury here. That's about the end of my report. I look forward to what Lee has to share, and if Grant wants to share some things as well, he'll have more opportunities, I'm sure, to talk about what his experiences were. That's really the lesson for today. It wasn't really a sermon, it's more just an updated report. But let's end with a invitation. It was really, really encouraging. One of the best things was seeing people actually respond to the teaching, like being baptized or repenting or coming back. And that's really encouraging as a teacher to have the opportunity to be part of that, because the word is supposed to create a response. And perhaps somebody here even knows that you need to respond in some way to the word. And we want to end with that invitation. If there's some way that we can help, let us know as we stand and sing.